friends, welcome to my channel. So our today's video lecture is on Pemphigus vulgaris. I still remember my UG days and how badly I used to hate these chapters. So that's why I have created this video with enough images and size content. So it would be easy for you to recall and remember this disease. So now any further ado, let's get started. Now tell me one thing. What will you do when you see such case sitting in a dental chair? What would be your reaction? You will be scared. What would be your diagnosis? Yes, it's Pemphigus vulgaris, as this is the topic of our video lecture, right? But at the end of this video lecture, you will be very definitive regarding this thing. So guys, Pemphigus vulgaris is a chronic autoimmune mucocutaneous disease, which means it occurs on its own, okay? It is autoimmune and mucocutaneous disease, which means it involves mucosa and skin. And it is frequently appeared first in the oral cavity. So there are higher chances that the person might visit dentist first, right? So we should know it very thoroughly. And then it progresses to other sites. Now what are the associated factors with this disease? Drugs like captopril, penicillamine, rifampicin, phenobarbital and phenylbutazone. Radiation and surgery. Diet, like specifically if the patient is taking excessive garlic in his or her diet. Stress like emotional stress and viruses like HHV8. Pregnant female, high level of pesticide exposure and other autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, myasthenia gravis, lupus erythematosus, pernicious anemia. If any or more than these factors are associated, then there are high chances of it being Pemphigus vulgaris. But still definitive diagnosis is remaining, right? What exactly happened in this disease? We have discussed that it is an autoimmune disease. So against what autoantibodies are generated? Autoantibodies against desmosomal components are produced which result in epithelial cell separation called acantholysis. The main antigen is DSG3. 50% of the patient also have autoantibodies to DSG1 and the frequency may differ with race. Now coming to the clinical features, early oral lesions. Total of 80 to 90% of the patient with Pemphigus vulgaris develop oral lesions first and then lesions appear in other parts of the body. Pemphigus vulgaris present as flaccid, thin-walled vesicle and or bullae, varying in diameter from few millimeters to several centimeters, arise on normal skin or mucosa that usually rupture to leave an area of erosion and ulceration. As you can see in the picture, right? And the site for which in mouth is buccal mucosa, palate, ventral surface of tongue and lips. Advanced sign usually consists of several desquamative or erosive gingivitis and it might appear on lip as well. Symptoms of this include lesions will bleed easily and they are tender on palpation. Like even if you touch it, it will start bleeding and patients are unable to eat. Such a severity of pain and discomfort these lesions create. Signs include thin layer of epithelium which peels away in an irregular pattern, leaving the denuded base. Now margins of this lesion are ragged borders as you can see in the image, okay, and be covered with white or blood tinged exudate. Edges of the lesion may extend peripherally as well. Various mucosal surfaces such as oral, ocular, nasal, pharyngeal, laryngeal, upper respiratory and anogenital mucous membranes can be involved. Now how we will diagnose this disease? Clinical examination in patients with Pemphigus vulgaris and active blistering, firm sliding pressure with a finger separates normal looking epithelium. As you can see in the image A where the clinician is applying the pressure adjacent to the lesion. In the lower image you can see the extended lesion in that applied pressure area, okay. So this is positive Nikolsky's sign. Another measure of diagnosis is biopsy. This is best done on intact vesicle or bullae less than 24 hours old. Then we can take Zank smear. The base of blister is scraped and examined for acantholytic cells. The free-floating rounded or ovoid acantholytic cells have an enlarged hyperchromatic centrally or acentrically situated nucleus. Then we can do immunofluorescence studies, either direct immunofluorescence or indirect immunofluorescence, but direct immunofluorescence is much more sensitive. In case of pemphigus vulgaris, the direct immunofluorescence technique will detect antibodies, usually IgG, and complement bound to the surface of keratinocytes. And as you can see in the lower image, chicken mess pattern is seen in this case. Other than this, we can do ELISA test, okay, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. It can detect DST1 and DST3 in serum samples. And we can also do immunoprecipitation and immunoelectron microscopy. So I hope this topic is simplified for you now. And let me know, you guys, that I love hearing from you all. So please do comment and let me know that how this video lecture was for you all. And also do let me know what are the other topics which you want in a non-boring way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.